All right, so remember how we had something set off those coyotes the night that we were trying to do EVPs?
Yeah.
Well, I was going through our footage and I found this.
Did you see that?
Yeah, so you saw it too. Hold on, I'm gonna play it again.
Right there. What is it?
Yeah, that's eye shine about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. Something walking around in the dark.
Alright info fans, you asked for it and you're getting it. Another live action challenge. We know you loved the Bigfoot challenge, so we sent our most expendable lab rat to hunt another monster, the Proctor Valley Monster, one of SoCal's most notorious cryptids. And if you're loving these creepy spooky challenges, then get ready, because we're officially sending our lab rat to one of the most haunted locations in the United States. But you'll have to wait until the end of the video to find out where. Well, it happened. Infographics sent me on a ghost hunt despite me making my position on ghosts very clear. I don't like them. Actually, this one is both a ghost and a monster hunt, and I guess you could throw in some UFOs in there too, because people have reported all kinds of crazy things in Proctor Valley for decades. Proctor Valley is located just east of San Diego, and the road itself is a nightmare to drive, as you can see, but surprisingly short, only about 3 miles or so. It cuts from San Diego to outlying communities and used to have ranches around before the surrounding area was built up. We got there in the late afternoon with enough daylight to scout out the location, and we brought a drone to once more help us in our hunt for, well, whatever was out there.
Hey guys, here we are, Proctor Valley Road. Southern California's most haunted road, allegedly. We have back on the hunt Matt, who's prepping the drone for flight, which we're pretty sure is legal, where we currently are. We have new on the team, Clara, and Annie, whom you can't see too well because of the sun, but you'll get plenty of looks at her. So apparently we have reports of the Proctor Valley Monster out here, which is supposed to be a large bipedal creature. And it was first reported, I believe, 1968 or so, when one of the farmers around here shot it and it bled out all over the place. What is that?
After parrot.
Oh.
Not parrot.
So ever since then, people have said that they've seen a large bipedal creature running around out here, which, to be honest, kind of smacks me of Bigfoot.
Alright, let me pause right here. There's actually stories of Bigfoot, or Zoobies as they call them in the area, dating back to the early 1970s, when a local psychiatrist reported having several encounters with them near his ranch home. A police officer was eventually involved and came away convinced of the creatures messing with the psychiatrist's home and property. The psychiatrist even made a plaster cast of a massive footprint, 16 inches long, but the doctor has actually gone quiet on the whole thing since then, explaining that one day he'll write his own book on the experiences. Interestingly though, local Indian tribes had legends of Bigfoot-like creatures in the same area. So in my opinion, if there is a Proctor Valley Monster, it's probably just a wandering Bigfoot. Given how built up the area around the valley is, I think it'd be impossible for one to actually live there. Also, interesting is the fact that Bigfoot have been reported along this stretch of mountains going down to Mexico and inside Mexico itself. Given that this is the only place to find water in this environment, it's not impossible that transient Bigfoot might have once used these mountains to pass through to other locales. And by the way, I was a Bigfoot skeptic up until my last challenge, when I found a massive footprint in the middle of our camp. That kind of stuff tends to quickly make you a believer. I mentioned the creature being shot in the video. There's one story that in the late 60s, a rancher shot a large bipedal creature that had been harassing livestock. The creature left plenty of blood as evidence, but sadly back then nobody was thinking of DNA. A massive monster hunt ensued by locals, but over the next few nights nothing was ever found. Back to the video.
We also have UFO sightings, which you can probably hear an airplane above our heads right now.
The UFO sightings have been reported for a long time in this area, but I'm extremely skeptical of these claims. As we would discover, there's probably an extremely good, very human reason for these claims.
Explanatory. And last but not least is the lady in white, at least this road's version of the lady in white, who's supposed to be a hitchhiker ghost. People will sometimes pick up and she'll disappear on them, or people will drive by and they'll see a white translucent figure. People say they've heard her scream. There's actually been a very recent sighting out here of the lady in white and of the Proctor Valley Monster, which prompted us to come out here and take a look. Really? They didn't wave?
Up next in our roster of monsters is the infamous Proctor Valley Ghost. Accounts differ on this one, with many people claiming that as they drive the road they see a young woman dressed all in white, while others have actually said they picked up a hitchhiker only to have them disappear right out of their vehicle. Ghastly screams have even been reported in the area, though we think we found a good answer to that phenomenon as well. Personally, I was hoping we'd tangle with a monster or even aliens rather than ghosts, because ghosts seriously squig me out. Naturally, infographics basically saw that as an invitation to make me go hunt them, and the place they have me going to next absolutely terrifies me, but that's a future video. This time on the crew we had Matt back from the Bigfoot hunt. You can follow him at matthew.scott.miller. And new on the monster hunting team was Clara, who you can follow at Clara Carlo. She's a weird and creepy stuff aficionado, and only afraid of cougars, and who can blame her? Next was Annie, a personal friend for many years whom you can follow at It's Annie Toe, who's definitely very scared of ghosts, and that's something we can both agree on. To start our hunt, we used the drone to recon the area so we could have a good idea of what we were dealing with. We noticed there were plenty of dry creek beds and big leafy trees, which meant that this area had groundwater the trees could reach. And we already knew that there was one large pond full of fresh water. This was good news, since water meant that if there was a real monster out here, it had somewhere to drink. Without water, you simply can't have a monster. Annie actually spotted a large goat in the desert to our right, and that was even better news because water plus food source means a monster has a realistic basis to survive here. No spooky magic or voodoo powers needed. Sorry, I know some people think Bigfoot has magical powers, but I'm confident it's just a regular old flesh and blood creature, if that's even what we're dealing with here. As we're heading back to the truck after checking out the desert, we had our first spooky encounter. We clearly heard a motorcycle approaching the truck, and then at one point even saw it, and then heard it drive right past the truck. However, seconds later, we all heard a second motorcycle, and this one stopped near the truck.
Kind of weird. So we saw a motorcycle go by, and then we thought we heard the second one, but there's nothing here. We heard it like, we heard it stop over here. Yeah, there's nothing here. Yeah, I heard it too. It sounded like another bike. There's nothing here. Right, but there's nothing here. It's like it sounded like it stopped.
You'll no doubt notice the extremely loud prop airplane flying overhead. Well, rest assured, that's not what we heard. There was the distinct sound of a second motorcycle, and we even heard the noise of tires crunching on gravel, and suddenly both stopped right near the truck. Very strange indeed, but I would later develop a theory on this.
Look what I found.
No, way too big for a Too big of possum.
Check that one out. I know what that's from.
Human?
No. That's a cougar.
Oh.
What Matt found next, though, was a little more immediately concerning. Now we had proof of cougars in the area, and not the fun Courtney Cox type, the type that claw your face off. As we were learning about our neighbors, though, I heard a distinct metallic sound which drew all of our attention.
There it is again.
Oh, it's that metal sign over there, behind the tree.
Yeah, I see the metal sign.
Yeah, it's clinking. Yeah, no, that's cougar shit.
And if you listen to that clip carefully, you can hear part of it at the very beginning, though it's really faint. And that's because we were using a directional microphone on the camera that wasn't pointed in the right direction. Also, the wind wasn't helping matters any. Matt said that the metal sign was simply being hit by the tree limbs, as the wind blew them, and we left it at that. But we shouldn't have, because we kept hearing that sound, and later I would get curious and walk over to the metal sign, and it wasn't even close to the tree limbs, being a good 8 feet behind the nearest tree. No answer on what exactly was causing that metallic sound, but it wouldn't be the last time we heard it. On the way back to the truck, we heard yet another strange sound. This definitely had an explanation, even if it was kind of hair-raising when we first heard it. Turns out the plane's engines powering down, which you normally can't hear too well from the ground, actually caused an echo that resonated loudly inside the valley. As we would quickly find out, the valley was shaped in a way that did very strange things with sound. Now it was time to wait for nightfall though, so we went to the local Applebee's to have dinner and wait until sunset. Once it was dark, it was time to do some serious investigating. My first goal was to check out the water source we knew existed. If there was a monster, it needed to drink water, so this would be our best bet at finding one, or evidence of one in the area. The way to the watering hole though was quite treacherous, and the pond itself was almost completely surrounded in thick weeds and tall grass, making an impassable wall.
Yeah, careful, this is not steady at all. Actually, I'm gonna fire my light on too. Watch out for snapbacks.
Good luck with all the cobwebs.
We followed a trail we thought would lead us around the pond, but an impassable wall of thick weeds and tall grass made it impossible to get to the water itself. As we were trying to find a way to the water, we noticed a strange red light in the sky which didn't seem to be moving.
Because I noticed it, I thought it was this one. It's too close to the ground and too big.
It's either a plane or an alien.
Yeah.
Could this be the famous Proctor Valley UFO we were seeing for ourselves? Not really. Turns out it was just a plane. We only showed you about 30 seconds of footage there, but what was strange was that we saw the red light standing still in the sky for about 2 minutes before it finally turned and we could see clearly the running lights of an airplane. I was really starting to put a theory together on what people were seeing when it came to UFOs out here. See, Proctor Valley just happens to be situated right under a flight corridor for incoming flights to San Diego. As the planes descend and slow down, it can give the illusion of big lights in the sky just standing still and hovering, which would perfectly explain many of the UFO sightings out here at night. The unique acoustics of the valley would also distort the sound of the planes, making people hear all kinds of weird stuff. For now though, we went back to trying to get to the pond itself. Now, I tend to be inquisitive to a fault, and when I spotted something strange, I absolutely had to go investigate it.
Like a little clearing? I think he was saying what I'm looking for is this.
Started walking towards some things.
What I found was something strange, which I had no explanation for.
What? I can't hear you.
There's a bundle of leaves here.
Something bundled up for someone.
Bundled up all these reeds. These? Yeah. Right? Like it's just a huge bundle. Let me turn my other light.
No, something was in there before.
Yeah, something was in there when it came out already. That's weird, right?
Yeah. You don't think beavers would do this?
There are no beavers in California.
Well, turns out there are beavers in California, but I'm pretty sure a beaver didn't make this weird structure. What it immediately made me think of was the big grass shelters reported in Ohio of their version of Bigfoot, the Ohio Grassman. This obviously was much smaller and no doubt the work of some kind of large rodent. If any of you know what it is and what made it, make sure to let us know in the comments. We decided to take an alternate route to try to find a way to the water on the other side, which meant plunging into the weeds once more.
Hey, if anything, I'm gonna get good footage of your butt for the show.
I have been told I have a nice butt.
Alright, to be fair, can't see my butt too well in hiking pants, but believe me, I've been complimented more than once.
Man, the echoes in the valley are like messing with me. Because I heard that car go down the road down there, but it sounded like it was coming down this road.
I heard the dog bark over there.
Yep.
And a second after, I heard it from the other truck.
Right? It's a weird place.
Matt had a point. We were all experiencing very distorted sounds because of the valley's strange acoustics. A car that we could clearly hear driving far away suddenly sounded like it was very near. We could even hear people at the houses on one side of the valley echoing all the way by us. I was starting to grow more convinced that the weird way the valley played with sound could explain a lot of the strange phenomenon people experienced. Our plan had been to find a spot near the water and set up some chairs and just wait and listen in the dark. But trying to find a way to the actual water was getting difficult.
Should we just keep going around?
Yeah.
Just keep going around until we find.
Yeah,
a
we'll
way
just
in?
keep going around until we find a way in.
As usual, I was far out front because in my excitement to hunt down monsters, I tend to forget that very real, very dangerous animals, like cougars, actually inhabit these places. Trust me, the girlfriend is always very annoyed when she sees these vids at how little concern I show for my own safety. She'd have a lot more to get mad about this night. What I ended up running into made me think we stumbled into evidence of a monster attack, for real.
Accidentally left their backpack behind, right?
I mean, someone who has like a lot of things can stow.
Oh, look, there's some clothing.
Yeah, there's some clothing.
Seriously. Well,
Someone has a radio on that thing?
Oh, that's the house party. They're going through the valley.
There's also a car that parked.
Oh, there's a note. There's something on it. Oh, jeez.
anything on it?
I don't see anything.
Okay.
This is, I mean, it's relatively clean. It's kind of been out here very long. What the? It's the same stuff.
The same backpack?
Yeah, because this one.
I guess maybe they were together.
It's like a set. Look at all this pipe. Open these
see.
backpacks.
Yeah, I
Is
see
that
the
a bad
piping.
idea?
Huh?
Should we open the backpacks or is that a bad idea? Are they just empty?
I don't know.
They're just empty.
Yeah, they're empty.
They're like brand new backpacks. I
Yeah.
feel like
You also have to remember, you guys have to remember we are 7 miles from the Mexican border. And matching camo backpacks tells me someone crossed.
Yeah, that's true. This could be.
Maybe they're just getting rid of that.
Right, they're probably getting rid of it.
But why? Why would they get rid of their backpacks? And these
Because
are,
if
Well, they
you-
were wearing
I don't think
camouflage
they were
too.
using it. Like,
Clothes.
there's like, it's still so new.
the reason they get rid of them is when they cross, they don't want to be seen with backpacks because then they'll be accused of crossing. So they dump it and they walk just in town.
that's a good point. Can you open that backpack up, Annings? I can't.
Yeah, I don't want to touch it.
COVID. Hashtag COVID.
Well, it's not that. I'm not worried about COVID.
Hashtag snakes. Nothing.
Anthrax.
Yeah.
Is that sweatshirt?
Yeah, all the camo. It would make sense if it was
It's all matching.
crossers. It's a really good place to cross too. Like, frankly, at this point, we're actually less. I think we're only 4 miles at this point. We're really not that far from the border. What's that?
But why would they leave a charger behind?
That's weird.
Maybe that could have been just dropped.
Yeah. Same with the toothbrush.
Maybe this is Monster Hunter Group A or Monster
Could
Hunter
be.
Group B.
Yeah. They were like trying to camouflage so they can get the monster.
So I should come clean. We are the infographics second group to come out here.
Mm-hmm.
We're Group B.
Wait, what do you mean?
We just found the remains of Group A. No.
As we were laughing, though, there was suddenly a big splash from the pond. Sadly, neither my camera nor Matt's picked up the splash thanks to the airplanes roaring overhead.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, something's splashing.
That was a big splash. Wait, it's still going. Yeah, you hear it? I gotta get closer. That was a big splash.
It's still swimming through.
Matt, see if you can keep an eye out over here, that open water with your camera. I'm gonna try to get down to the shore, see if I can see what's making a splash. All right, guys, sorry, I have to cut. I can't get through this with the phone up. All right, it's taking me like 15 seconds to get to the water's edge. So whatever was splashing around should still be here. Hey, I'm at the edge. I don't see anything. What's up?
I see more of that like black piping over there, and I heard like a sound. I don't know. It's like a trap or something.
Did it sound metallic?
Huh?
Did it sound metallic?
I don't know.
No, whatever was splashing should have been able to see it over here. No, I don't think anyone just randomly decided to start swimming at what, 10 at night now?
What was strange was that the splashes were loud enough for Clara to think someone was actually swimming in the pond. But as you can see in the video, the pond was perfectly still. If something that large was moving in the water, there should have been ripples. As it only took about 10 to 15 seconds for me to rush down to the water's edge, we went dark to sit and watch and listen for a few minutes, and Clara suddenly got scared because she heard something walking through the brush toward her, so she ran over by me. Matt and Annie were still up the hill, keeping an eye out on the lake from a high vantage point, so we knew it wasn't them. We both sat still and waited for a few seconds, but whatever was rustling had stopped. I only heard the rustling, but Claire was adamant that it had sounded to her like something was actually walking. It wouldn't be the last time we heard mysterious walking. In fact, Annie and Matt also heard the rustling and footsteps, but from a completely different direction.
Yeah, I do hear it down there now.
Something's coming down the path.
We got someone coming down the path. Yo. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, let me get it.
Do you hear that though?
Yeah.
Like on the path?
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah, someone's in the path. We gotta grab our chairs up here. Yeah, we can hear something walking down the path where we came from.
Sorry, I don't have a free hand.
We sat in darkness for a minute in case it was a group of people coming our way, but nobody ever showed up. The footsteps had simply stopped. Eventually, I knew I had to go and get answers.
Tell you what, I'll walk down in that direction.
All right.
You don't have to go down there.
It's a challenge, you guys got to do it. Go be brave.
I left the group behind and walked down the path about 50 meters to be completely alone, but nothing ever showed up, and I didn't hear any more sounds. Maybe the area really was haunted, because I certainly couldn't explain how something big had been splashing in the pond but left no disturbance in the water, nor the mysterious footsteps we kept hearing. I remained skeptical. We already knew the valley was playing weird tricks with sound, even if these sounds were a lot closer than the far-off houses and airplanes overhead.
All right, so we're leaving the lake area. And my goal was to see, since this is the only open water source around here, if there was no easy way to get to the water, if there was no path, anything like that, then I really doubt there's any such thing as a Proctor Valley Monster. But we ended up finding a way to the open water that was pretty easy, so possible, I guess. At least we know we can get to water. And I don't believe in magical monsters. So whatever the beast of Proctor Valley is, it needs food and water.
Next, we decided to change our focus from monsters to ghosts, since we seemed to be getting what seemed to be phantom footsteps following us around. The legend of the Proctor Valley ghost tells that the spirit is either that of a woman who was dragged out here and killed, or of a teenage boy who was murdered by the Proctor Valley Monster after driving out here with his girlfriend. As the story goes, and it's exactly that, a story because there's no evidence to support it, the two teens drove out here sometime in the 50s or 60s and parked their car to make out. Then they heard a noise outside the car. The boy went to investigate and the girl heard him scream, and all was silent except for the sound of something scraping on the roof. She locked the car doors and stayed in the car until dawn, when she finally got out and, to her horror, found that her boyfriend had been strung up from a tree, and it was his fingertips brushing against the roof of the car that she had heard as his body swayed in the breeze. Ooh, super spooky. Sounds like a load to me. But we couldn't ignore that there's been many sightings of a ghost on the road, so we decided to pull over and try to communicate. First, we used a spirit box, which is basically a device that jumps across radio frequencies. It's said to allow spirits an opportunity to speak in between the radio static, but how that's supposed to work, I never heard a good explanation for.
Could you tell us the color of the chair that nobody's sitting in there?
Now, I'm a big skeptic on spirit boxes. I've seen some pretty interesting results on other shows, but I can't prove that they weren't just making it up to have good content. You see, that's the thing about me. If nothing exciting happens, I'm not going to make something up for you guys. That trust is important to me. The thing about spirit boxes is that because they jump across frequencies at such high speed, with enough questions asked, you're bound to get a small clip of someone speaking or a song that seems to give an answer to your question. At least that's my opinion. Like I said, other shows have gotten huge results with them. Maybe we were unlucky. We sat for about 10 minutes asking questions and getting nothing in response, but then suddenly we were startled by a pack of coyotes extremely close to us. Something had suddenly set them off, and when we went back and watched the video, well, we found something very peculiar. Did you catch it? As Matt was sweeping the camera and flashlight around, something that looks a hell of a lot like eye shine is caught by the camera running between two large trees. The only problem is that if it is indeed eye shine, it's standing between 7 and 9 feet off the ground. Watch a zoomed-in version. Could it have been a bird? Unlikely, as the vast majority of birds, except some like owls, don't have the tapetum lucidum, the membrane that allows animals to see much better at night and can give off eye shine. Another reason to doubt it was a bird is the fact that it's moving so slowly, relatively speaking. This would be putting a bird in danger of stalling out. Owls can fly as slow as 2 miles per hour, but only if they're gliding. And if you watch the video a few times, you can tell it bobs up and down almost as if walking. What's really curious though is that throughout the night, everyone on the crew heard footsteps on gravel at some point in the night.
Yeah, they're coming from all around us.
It's still high up in the valley.
Nah, they're close. They're just over here. Those are high up in the valley. These ones over here are pretty close.
Could the eyeshine have been a coyote? Well, as you can see in the video, the ground is pretty level there, so a coyote would have to be standing 7 to 9 feet off the ground to give off that eyeshine. But was it eyeshine at all? That's for you to decide. I have no conclusion. As Matt checked on one side of the road, I went to the other and I heard a familiar metal sound that we'd heard earlier in the day during the daytime.
Still.
It was like metal grinding on metal. Do you know that high pitched sound it makes?
Careful. Is that barbed wire?
Yeah.
As usual, I ran off to investigate, this time having a close encounter with some unidentified wildlife.
It sounded like metal on metal, like screeching metal. But like, not like that high pitched stuff like that. I don't know how to describe it. Fuck. It sounded like metal on metal. Right over here. And then when you guys got here, I went in a little bit. Went in past there. And I heard something disturb the birds. It was moving that way because the birds were sounding off like one by one as it was going off that way. So I tried to run up and cut it off to get a view of it. And I realized I don't have a camera on me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you kind of have to saw back here.
And I mean, it could have been a straggler from that coyote back. It really could have been.
Yeah.
But that metal on metal sound was here.
We might have
What would
caught
metal
it.
and metal be?
I don't know. I don't know. You hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was over here. Yeah, it was definitely behind us.
Oh my god, we all think it's in a different direction.
That's the trick of the valley.
Yeah, the valley's weird. That sound.
Now, I was probably chasing a straggler coyote, but if you want to know what we all heard, play this next clip at max volume.
I don't know. You hear that?
Yeah.
There's two distinct knocking or thumping noises, one after the other. Interestingly, we all thought the sound was coming from different directions. Sadly, the microphone again was not pointed in the right direction, so we couldn't record it clearly. Next, we decided we'd go down the road a ways to get clear of any other coyotes and split up into twos to try to record some EVPs. First up was Annie and I, and we got dropped off as Matt and Clara drove a half-mile away.
All right, so Oh crap, I need my light because I can't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
I can't hold all these things at once. I gotta hold the camera.
And the light.
And light and EMF meter. Okay, here's the backwards. Here's the EMF meter. So Annie and I are gonna do a 2-person sit-in. First, we're gonna make sure there's no stray electromagnetic fields. I don't know. I don't buy this EM meter stuff, to be honest with you. Like, there's so many stray electromagnetic fields. Like, there's so many things that can set this off. I bet if I bring it close to the phone, it'll... Oh, never mind, I won't. Okay. Alright, we're gonna set this here. See, I know if you shake it, it'll... Alright, so that'll be there. And we're gonna do a sit-in and try to get some EVPs with Zoom. Turn your light off.
We shut down all electronics and lights except for the EMF detector and our recorder, with the plan to quickly start filming if the EMF detector started up. I figured maybe the ghosts wouldn't like all these gadgets we had with us, so I wanted to be more inviting. The EMF didn't go off once the entire time, but I did hear a footstep and the crunch of gravel right as I asked any present spirits to speak into the recorder. It happened right over me speaking, so the recorder didn't pick anything up clearly. I'll spare you guys about 20 minutes of listening to mostly empty audio because we got no EVPs. After about half an hour, I radioed Matt so we could swap. Maybe Clara and I would have a better energy, and the lady in white that haunts the Proctor Valley Road would respond to us. A spirit definitely didn't respond, but something else did. As Clara and I were halfway through our EVP session, we heard something in the desert behind us. To me, it sounded very much like an animal, so I grabbed my flashlight and took off. We managed to chase away whatever it was, but in the process we discovered the remains of something entirely too big to be a deer or other common prey animal. There were scattered rib bones around, but what really got our attention was the size of the backbone.
Can you flip it over?
The bone?
Yeah. You got gloves on? You got my gloves on.
Oh god. Okay. Okay. Alright.
I radioed Matt to come down and check out the bone since he's got more experience hunting, but he couldn't identify it either. We did some Googling and settled on that it was probably the backbone of a goat. Whatever it was, it meant there was prey in the area. While I'd been busy making Clara handle icky bones with flesh still on them, Matt and Annie had tried their own spirit box session.
Yeah, that kind of works. They can kind of see us.
Oh yeah.
Well,
My red lights. Yeah.
there we go. Okay. You recording?
Yep.
Okay.
Sound rolling.
This is... Hello. It's us. We're going to do another spirit box session. We are... Where are we? Probably 4 miles out down the road. Next to a giant pile of rubble. Turn this on. Do we want to set this down somewhere? Or just hold it? I think just hold it.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Are there any spirits here with us tonight? Would anyone here like to communicate with us?
Once more, despite several minutes of questions, there was no clear reply, though at one point there was a voice that definitely was not a part of the normal radio chatter the box was skimming through.
Did you hear that?
Hello? No.
I don't know what that was, but I heard something. We think we heard you. Can you try to say something else? You can talk to us through this box.
Whatever it was, the voice never responded again. The thing is, though, that after using that box all night long, the voice sounded like nothing we'd heard before. After a while more with the spirit box, the two decided to just sit and listen, hoping to catch an EVP with a recorder. Then, Annie started hearing things.
You would hear like things on gravel, but that could just be like birds.
Right. It could be. Honestly, besides the wind, it's dead silent out here.
Mm-hmm.
However, then Matt heard it as well.
It's interesting that they're
I heard
sounding
that.
now. Huh?
Did you hear that?
No.
Definitely heard that.
What did it sound like?
Gravel. Definitely heard gravel move. But you guys said you heard that too when you were down there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Eventually, we reunited so I could show Matt and Annie the bones I found, and as we were coming back to the truck, we got the shock of our lives.
It's not going off anymore. Of course, the moment I start recording.
Maybe he just doesn't want us to record.
Probably doesn't.
Thank
That's
you
why
for the
when we
tennis
stopped
balls.
recording, I did this.
For context for my video, we went out there to go look at some bones, and we came back to find 2 tennis balls perfectly cratered next to my truck. And we only went probably, what do you say, 30 yards out?
Yeah,
Hit
no
that.
further than 30 yards.
We didn't go that far.
Thank you for these tennis balls. Can you maybe come close to this box and make the light change red? Can you move one of these tennis balls?
Were these tennis balls yours?
We had no explanation for the tennis balls, and Claire and I were confident they hadn't been there before the truck rolled up. To try to get some activity around the tennis balls, we decided to hike far up the road and leave the area for about 20 minutes, leaving behind my phone and our recorder to pick up any activity.
Alright, it's recording.
Okay. Alright, I guess we'll start up the road.
Yeah.
Spirits, you're welcome to play with the tennis balls. Please don't steal my phone.
Or break anything. That'd be nice. Thank you.
We left no lights on in order to try and encourage activity, my hope being that if a spirit was present, it would make the EMF detector light up or mess with it somehow. At the very least, it might move the tennis ball, and we'd be able to see it when we returned and lit up the scene with our flashlights since the camera was rolling in a continuous take. The EMF detector never went off, but for some reason the camera's focus, which was set to the EMF detector, randomly shifted as if it was automatically trying to pull focus to something directly in front of it. As we return back to the tennis balls after 20 minutes, you can see us in the far background, and once more the focus jumps back to the EMF meter, where it should have been the entire time. Now, I've used digital cameras as a professional photographer and a cinematographer for a decade, and there's no good technical reason why the camera should have shifted focus in pitch black. The camera should have remained locked on the point of light it can clearly see. I can theorize that the second time it happened, when the focus shifts back to the EMF meter, perhaps the shine of our flashlights prompted the autofocus to shift. The only problem with that theory is that our flashlights were visible for about 45 seconds before the shift happened. A technical glitch could prompt both focus shifts though, so I can't immediately discount that as a possibility. So, what's my verdict on Proctor Valley? First, I think the very recent evidence we discovered of border crossers in the area can go a long way toward explaining sightings of a humanoid monster. After all, if you're cruising down Proctor Valley Road in the middle of the night and your headlights sweep across a person dressed in camo, there's a good chance you're going to be visually confused. The common reports of seeing humanoid figures walking across the ridges or in the desert at night are probably exactly that, human beings crossing the Mexican border and into California. What about UFOs? Well, it's abundantly clear from our videos the area sits exactly under a flight corridor for aircraft arriving in San Diego. Low-flying aircraft from the right angle can look strange, and it doesn't help that the very strange acoustics of the valley can play havoc on your sense of hearing, as we also thoroughly documented. Even a local house party from one of the homes up in the hills kept making us hear things, as the sounds of people laughing bounced off the valley walls and hit us from different directions. The occasional car traveling down the Proctor Valley Road also threw off a bunch of confusing sounds. The place has very strange natural acoustic features that can really play tricks on you, and I think this goes a very long way toward explaining most of the paranormal phenomenon reported there. How about the tennis balls that appeared out of nowhere? Well, when we looked over our drone footage from our daytime scouting run of the valley, we actually found the shadow cast by the two tennis balls from a top-down view of the road. After referencing the on-the-ground cameras we were using, we confirmed the shadows the drone saw were indeed the tennis balls. How we missed those two tennis balls the entire time we were there is a real mystery of Proctor Valley in my opinion. In the end, I think Proctor Valley is mostly debunked. The Proctor Valley Monster is likely just border crossers dressed in camo gear. And the UFOs spotted here are just weird-looking and sounding low-flying airplanes. If you're a fan of ghosts and live in Kentucky, then you're in luck. Because for my next challenge, I'm coming to your state to get locked in Waverly Hills Sanatorium overnight, one of America's top 10 most haunted places. Did I mention lately how much I hate ghosts? Now go watch Challenge Hunt Bigfoot, or click this other video instead.